Welcome to Sports Beat KC College Basketball Edition. Rustin Dodd, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks, is here, and so am I, Blair Kerkhoff. We're going to talk about the beginning of the conference college basketball season. Conference play is busting out all over the college hoop landscape, and it arrives in the Big 12 on Saturday, January 2, with a really big, I think, a big slate of games. And in the Big 12 this year, you almost can't help but have a big slate of games. When everybody's playing on the same day, that means you're going to have a lot of ranked teams playing. And on opening weekend, you'll have two games against among ranked teams. You've got Baylor and Kansas playing at Allen Fieldhouse. You've got Oklahoma playing host to Iowa State. And, Rustin, let's get things started talking about the Jayhawks, who bring 11-1. Is that what they are overall? 11-1 and a number 2 ranking in the Associated Press poll today. Could go to number 1 next week if they hold serve against Baylor at home Saturday. I say that because Michigan State lost. Top-ranked Michigan State lost earlier in the week to Iowa. So could be Kansas number 1 versus number 2 OU on Monday night. Before they get there, though, Baylor on Saturday. Rustin, second half of the Jayhawks' latest game against Cal Irvine, I thought the Jayhawks played well, but kind of an uneven second half, and that's kind of what I see with Kansas. I don't know if very few of these 12 non-conference games have they seemed to put together a full 40 minutes. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think that's about right. I mean, they didn't play. They played well early, I guess, against San Diego State, and then they didn't play really well in the second half. I think I give them a little bit of a mulligan against UC Irvine, just because they were such an odd team to play against. I mean, they had a 7'6" guy in the middle. They had a 7'2" guy coming off the bench. They played a lot of zone. So it was a little bit of a different matchup, I guess. So I think it took them a while to sort of figure UC Irvine out. So I guess if you're looking for a positive to say, okay, you can kind of take that first half away, maybe you can forgive it a little bit. But heading into conference play, definitely wasn't like a flawless performance or anything like that.
Do you see Kansas shortening its rotation in conference play? Let's establish that they play. Correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, 6 big guys and 5 backcourt guys. Let's count them off. Perry Ellis probably leads the team in minutes played among front court guys. Yeah. Hunter Mickelson, Jamari Traylor, Landon Lucas, Carlton Bragg, and Shek Diallo, of course, the other freshman. Among the front court guys, in the back court, Frank Mason, Devontae Graham, Wayne Selden, Svi Mikhailiuk, and Brandon Green.
Yeah. No, I think Bill Self has said they're going to tighten up the rotation, and I think in his mind, in most years you've seen 4 smalls, 4 bigs, and maybe sort of a 5th small, sort of a guy that plays spot minutes here and there. I think that's going to be the case again. He said something interesting last night when he was talking about his front court rotation. He mentioned first how he thinks his experienced guys are playing better right now, how they give Kansas a better chance to win. But he brought up this point. He said, a lot of times in the non-conference season, we've kind of gone through stretches where we haven't played very well. And he goes, and if you actually look at that, sometimes it's my fault. He was like, sometimes I'm putting guys in the game just to get them playing time, and we sort of lose momentum. We sort of lose some chemistry and some flow. And he's like, that's going to stop now that conference season is rolled around. So I think he's going to not only tighten it up to an 8 man rotation. I think they're also going to see the main guys, Frank Mason and Devontae Graham and Perry Ellis, playing upwards of 32, 33, 34 minutes per game. So I think that gets tightened as well. But who is it going to be? I think that's still sort of remains to be seen. I think for now, especially with them opening against Baylor and Oklahoma, you're going to see Hunter Mickelson in the starting lineup, and probably a lot of Landon Lucas, and depending on the matchup, maybe a lot of Jamari Traylor against somebody like Oklahoma who can play a little bit smaller. But I still think that Shek Diallo and Carlton Bragg will be part of something going forward, but it might take another couple of weeks for them to sort of get it, as Self said last night.
I can't help but think that for Kansas to be the Final Four team that they think they can be, or maybe their fans expect them to be, that it goes without saying that the most talented players have to be on the floor at the most important times, and Sheck Diallo, by all scouting reports, by all recruiting analysis, is one of those players. His upside is fantastic, but does Kansas win big games against good competition if Diallo and to maybe a lesser extent Carlton Bragg, the two, based on upside and potential, aren't seeing the floor, and Kansas is playing Ellis, Mickelson, and then maybe Traylor or Lucas?
I think that's the big question, and maybe the big concern, I guess, if you're a Kansas fan who's looking ahead to, can this team, go to a Final Four or win a national championship? I don't know if it's an answerable question right now, but I do think that Bill Self might be either trying to motivate Sheck Diallo or send some messages. I don't know if he's reading the Kansas City Star or checking Twitter, but I do think that, for instance, last night he came in and he obviously is kind of trying hard. He shot about a 19-footer about a minute after he'd been in the game. That drove Self crazy. So just little things like that. This is sort of a nerdy stat, but his usage rate, which basically means every time a possession either ends with a Sheck Diallo shot or a Sheck Diallo turnover, is like 30% when he's in the game, which is way too high.
Yikes.
Yeah, which is way too high for a role player. And so if he's going to be what Self wants him to be, which is essentially a role player for Perry Ellis or the other guys on the floor, he just needs to kind of settle down and sort of figure out his role and what he needs to do. And right now, I think it's been sort of just tough for him, especially missing, earlier in the season.
I thought it was a good sign for Kansas that Ellis not only had the good game at San Diego State, but he had a good second half against UC Irvine. I'm sure Self sees that as well. That's your best players have to play well, and in terms of accomplishment and career achievements, Perry Ellis is one of those guys.
Yeah, I think so. And he's still a little bit hard on him, I think.
He's been hard on him, hasn't he?
Last night after the game, he had 13 points in the second half, and Self was more like, where was he the first half? He was a non-factor. He wasn't there. But yeah, I think that's I guess that's not going to change. But I think he's played better over the last 2 to 3 weeks. He had 18 against Montana and 20 against San Diego State, and been more aggressive. And I think you like where he is at heading into conference play.
I don't have the polls in front of me. We know that in the AP poll, Kansas is 2, Oklahoma's 3, and I think Iowa State's 11. I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think that's right. But I do have conference RPI in front of me, and the Big 12 is number 1 in conference RPI. And if you're number 1, going into conference play, chances are you're going to stay number 1 throughout the season, because now conference teams are playing against each other. After this week, the only non-conference games remaining for Big 12 teams are the Big 12 SEC Challenge at the end of January. That's when Kansas and Kentucky play at Allen Fieldhouse. But you cover Kansas, and we both pay attention to the Big 12 and other leagues in college basketball. It looks like it's going to be a terrific league this year, and we've mentioned it before. Kansas opens against Baylor at home and Oklahoma on Monday night. That's the first big Monday game. Kansas bidding for its 12th straight conference championship. There's kind of a little bit of pressure on Kansas to hold serve at home against good teams. I heard Bill say this after the UC Irvine game that he thinks home teams are going to lose this year in conference play because the league is so stacked. Kansas, I think if they have, if they want to come out of this thing, with another conference championship, it'd be a good idea to be 2-0 going into, Monday night, after Monday night.
No, I think that's definitely the case. That's why I think it's almost better to open the conference play on the road if you can, just to kind of give you that margin for error. And it's almost like if you can, beat a team on the road, it's almost like a game and a half on them in the conference standings, just because of the round robin schedule and the nature of it. And kind of the way I've always looked at it for Kansas is that, the reason it's so difficult for this streak to end is if they don't lose at home, the other team basically has to hold serve at home as well to stay with them in terms of the conference race. Because if you want to beat Kansas and win the Big 12 and stop the streak, because you can win the Big 12, but Oklahoma can win the Big 12, but the streak might continue. They might share it. So if you want to beat Kansas by a full game in the Big 12, you almost have to go perfect at home and then pick off a couple of games on the road just to be right there. And I think that's, with how difficult the conference is, that's really difficult to do.
And to speak to that, I remember last year, a couple of things from last year. Kansas finished 13-5. That was their worst conference record under Bill Self. Most conference losses that Kansas has had in quite a long time. But they won the conference they didn't share it. They won it outright because it was a very competitive league again last year. I just remember Iowa State, which I thought was the second best team in the league. I think they tied Oklahoma for second, but I thought Iowa State was the second best team in the league. Iowa State held serve to beat Kansas in Ames. I think they went undefeated at home, but I do remember them going to Lubbock and losing at Texas Tech on a Saturday afternoon. And I just remember thinking after that game, that's the kind of game Kansas doesn't lose. They'll lose at Iowa State or they'll lose at other ranked teams in the league. But they never seem to lose at home. Well, they don't lose at home. They've lost 9 home games in Bill Self's tenure at KU. But they also don't lose to unranked teams on the road. They tend not to anyway. They did lose at K-State last year.
Yeah, they lost to TCU.
Well, a couple years ago they did. But those are still. I mean, those are so few and far between that it's allowed them to win the conference year after year after year. But it is definitely going to be difficult this year because Oklahoma, which brought back 4 starters from a team that went farther than any team from the Big 12 in the NCAA tournament last year, is playing terrific. I mean, Buddy Hield is who was the conference player of the year last year, is off to a terrific start. I don't know if he was the MVP in the tournament that they just won in Hawaii, but he's leading the conference in scoring. It's a guard-oriented team. It's a great shooting team, and one that's coming to Allen Fieldhouse on Monday, coached by Lon Kruger, who's a fantastic coach. But Baylor's the first chore for Kansas. Baylor's here on Saturday. Rico Gathers, the lead in the league in rebounding, which I think he did last year as well. The weak links in the Big 12 are the same as they usually are. TCU at the bottom. But to be honest with you, Texas Tech is off to something of a surprising start. They're up in the RPI. Texas with Shaka Smart. They lost to UConn earlier this week, but they beat North Carolina at home. What are your observations? What have you seen from Big 12 play so far?
Yeah, well, here's my question, Blair. I have a question for you. So I think you got the RPI in front of you, and you mentioned the teams up in the rankings. So I think it's going to be pretty difficult for the Big 12 not to be basically number one in the RPI conference-wise for most of the season, as they've sort of been the last couple of years.
If they finish that way, it'd be the third year in a row.
Yeah, and so they'll likely have at least 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, I would guess, maybe 6.
If they could go 6 or 7.
Yeah, if things break right. But this is sort of an ongoing question too, but and maybe a better question for March, but is it right to talk about the Big 12 as the best basketball conference for during the regular season when they haven't had a Final Four team in 4 years and they haven't had a Final Four team other than Kansas in a decade?
Haven't come close.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm trying to think of the Elite 8 teams they've had since the 12 Kansas team. I'm not sure they did. I don't know. I can't remember if they've even gotten. Did Baylor get to a regional final?
Yeah, a couple of those were before 2012.
Yeah. So it's been since the Kansas run to the national championship game in 2012. We know Kansas has underachieved in the tournament, and really the conference has underachieved. And you're right. It's a topic. It's definitely a topic for March. I think there's. I remember writing this and thinking about this last year that it's time. It's time to put up.
Yeah.
Shut up and put up, because the league brags about its strength, and it should. I mean, if you're the top-ranked RPI conference, you can brag about that. You can put out all the promotional stuff, and you can make sure ESPN talks about it on their panels, and make sure the CBS guys talk about top-ranked RPI and where everybody's ranked and everything. But for the last few years, it's just been such a disappointment to see how the Big 12 performs in March. I was at the Iowa State loss to UAB in Louisville last year in the first game, and
It's not. It's obviously not a fair metric to measure teams, just the NCAA tournament. But in a lot of ways, it sort of mirrors the Big 12, I should say. They've won the conference. They win the conference every year. They're incredible during the regular season. They've gone to 2 Final Fours, but they've struggled a little bit in March, here and there. And in very much the same way, the Big 12 seems to have found a way to be the best regular season team and have the best RPI. Although another odd stat I saw earlier this month was the amount of true road games the Big 12 has played.
Not so much.
No, I think they're probably up to about 6 now, or 7. Maybe there's more than that now. But at one point they had played 5, and likewise the SEC had played like 21. And granted, they have 4 extra teams, but even percentage-wise, it's not been close. And I think I asked Bill Self about that, and he didn't have a great answer for it, but obviously the teams have not scheduled like some teams would.
No, that's also been a historical truth about the Big 12 is the few true road games that they play. Kansas never seems to play more than 2, and they just played 1 this year at San Diego State. I actually covered one of the SEC road games a couple weeks ago when Mississippi State lost at UMKC. Maybe that's why the Big 12 doesn't do that sort of thing. It's a good point. It's a fair point, and I think when March comes around, it's fair to ask the coaches if they think they were tested enough during the season to have their teams prepared for March. It's the same topic that SEC football coaches get. They never take their teams on the road. You'll see a neutral site game, in Houston or Atlanta or Dallas or something, but rare is the Alabama at game in a mega non-conference battle, and so but the SEC football backs it up in bowl season. It is the top conference, and they win all the bowl games and they win national championships. Big 12 hasn't done what it should be doing in the postseason, and but they've done all they can do, I think, in the non-conference part of this season, and that should be acknowledged. And again, we'll hear all about it on television and on sports shows, and I think it'll be a fantastic regular season in the Big 12. But you and I will be sitting back here in March and talking. It needs to happen now. Take advantage of the seeds. This is where it really helps you. It's in the seeding. And, Kansas is always a 1 or a 2, and Iowa State the last few years is 2 or 3, and Oklahoma has been a good seed. Now play up to it, live up to it, and and get a team to the Final Four, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it'll be tough for Oklahoma not to be a 1 or a 2 seed. They haven't lost yet.
Right. No signature win.
No.
They beat Wisconsin, but Wisconsin's down this year. They've already had the coaching change.
But I don't know. The computers like them, and they beat Villanova as well by a lot of.
They did. They did smack
beat them by
Villanova
20 points or so. So I think they'll be in position to it's interesting because I think Oklahoma might be the best non-Kansas Big 12 team maybe in the last 3 to 4 years. But I do think that they're not catching Kansas on the best year either. So I don't know if they'll have enough to win it outright, but I do think this might be Kansas's biggest challenge, at least just if you look at the numbers and the talent, maybe since maybe even since Missouri.
In 2012?
In 2012.
That was a terrific Missouri team. That was the Marcus Dedman, Kim English team. That was a great team that ended up winning the Big 12 tournament that year, but underachieving in the NCAA. That's a good thought, though. Maybe we'll save that for another show. Is it kind of during this Kansas streak of 11 in a row, the best teams? I heard Bill Self say this on his show the other night, on his radio show that they were talking about the best basketball players kind of in the world right now. Guys like Kevin Durant and Curry. I forgot the other one they mentioned, but Kansas had beaten all of them. And Kansas, the players that Bob Davis and Bill Self mentioned were players in which Kansas was undefeated against. Of course, they beat Durant twice when he was at Texas, and of course Curry was with Davidson in the NCAA tournament. I wish I could remember the third one, but I can't. But these are all good points. And let me backtrack really quick. You brought it up. I'm glad you did. The Oklahoma win over Villanova was terrific.
Yeah.
It was a great win, probably the best win by the conference this year, because I think Villanova is a very, very good team. Very good. And I've got the RPI for teams in front of me. The Big 12 has 7 in the top 45. Kansas State's 45th. West Virginia, Texas are in the 30s. Kansas, interestingly enough, not near the top. Kansas on this RPI facsimile that I have is 19th, with Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech ahead of them all in the top 10. Why would Kansas's RPI?
I will say so. For the numbers nerds listening to this podcast who are screaming at their podcast or iPods to stop talking about the RPI, there are some criticisms of the RPI. I mean, they don't factor in margin of victory, which is the biggest one that the RPI does not include, which is makes it less kind of a metric than some of the other ones. But so there is that, and also Kansas, their schedule, they didn't play. They played a difficult schedule, but they're really dragged down by some of the teams they did play, like Loyola. I can't even remember what state that Loyola was in now. That
it's maybe the Maryland one.
It was Maryland, yeah. They played Loyola, Maryland, and then a couple other teams in the 200s.
And that's rare.
Northern
for Kansas.
Colorado.
It usually doesn't turn out that way.
Yeah,
for
that's
Kansas.
Usually what they're brilliant at is that they schedule so many teams that are right around the 75 to 125 mark. So they don't really have any bad teams on their schedule. They play a lot of teams that end up winning their league or things like that, and they're great at doing that. It was a concerted effort, honestly, and I think Bill Self has said this. They scheduled so difficult the last couple of years, and they had young teams, and they couldn't really kind of get those guys playing time in the early season, and I think they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit this year and just wanted a couple of those kind of breather games. And then it just so happened that the Kentucky game was January 30th, and then they only had one true road game this year. So a lot of things just kind of broke right for them to have a little bit of a softer schedule.
Right. We should note also that not only is Texas Tech in the top, they're number 6 according to this RPI list that I have. Monmouth comes in at number 12. Kansas at 19. What we've got plenty of paper here. We got our stats and our lists and everything here. Baylor with Rico Gathers at Kansas on Saturday. Oklahoma, we said on Monday night, the first big Monday game. A couple other games just this weekend to keep an eye on. Iowa State is at Oklahoma. What a great opener that is, Saturday afternoon. And then West Virginia is at Kansas State. I think that's an 11 a.m. game on Saturday because the bowl game. What time does the bowl game kick off? What a great day. If you're a Kansas State fan, what a great day for you. The basketball game at 11, the bowl game against Arkansas at 2:30 in that afternoon. So I would think that, just based on RPI, 6, maybe 7 teams in the NCAA tournament for Big 12, and it's one of those years where maybe if 9-9 is all you need to get to in league play to feel like you've got a good chance of being, an at-large team in the NCAA tournament. I mean, I think that's kind of what the Big 12 has established over the last couple of years with its great RPI, with its number one RPI conferences. If you're 9-9 or better in league play, your chances are you're going to get in. Let me say one more thing about the reason the RPI is important. It's not so much where the individual team is ranked now, but when the selection committee gets together, a team's record against the top 25 in the RPI or the top 50.
Well,
that really
which
matters.
is why, I mean, if a team like Kansas State could go 9-9 and they could be, they could rack up 4 or 5 top 50 wins just in the Big 12 alone. So
that's right.
I mean, it could be crucial for just a team like that on the bubble.
Let's take a quick look nationally. Last year, Kentucky got off to the great start and never stopped until it got to the Final Four. I think I'm close to being right about this. If they didn't get every first place vote in every poll during the year, it was only a couple of polls where they didn't. And that's how dominant Kentucky was. The Willie Cauley-Stein, Kentucky Wildcats that ended up losing to Wisconsin in the Final Four. There's nothing like that so far, is there? I mean, we've talked to Michigan State, got off to a great start. Oklahoma's still undefeated. A couple others are maybe Xavier still undefeated. There's a few undefeated teams. But I don't see anything like a slam dunk Final Four pick in college basketball.
No, it's definitely wide open at the top. And I think sometimes people say, there's not a lot of great teams, so that means college basketball's down. I don't know if that's a great argument because maybe the teams 20 through 50 are better than they usually are. But I think I saw this stat. Kansas is now number 1 in Ken Palm's computer rankings. I think starting today they were number 1. And those rankings generally are year to year are kind of stay the same. And their computer ranking, their number, their efficiency, points per possession, minus points they allowed, all that kind of stuff. If they were in last year's team, last year's rankings, they would be like 8th. So their computer ranking, however they do it, was basically shows that they are the 8th best team last year is basically the number 1 team this year. So I think that can kind of
give you an indication.
Yeah, give you an indication of just how strong last year was, especially at the top when you had Duke and Kentucky and Wisconsin, and then the teams just right below them.
For what it's worth, I really like Maryland. If I had to identify a team that would be my one team who I'd give the highest percentage chance of getting into the Final Four, I think that would be Maryland right now. Do you have one?
No, but I will say that Purdue is a better team than I thought they would be.
Isn't Purdue interesting?
Yeah, they're defensively they rank in the top 5 in the country and lost just 1 game. They would be a team that I would not have really looked at much at the beginning of the season.
All right, now you just said Purdue. You mentioned Purdue's defense. West Virginia, of course, is doing its defensive thing again this year, but the new rules in college basketball that were supposed to increase scoring while trying to rid the game of a lot of physicality, especially away from the ball. I think you've seen a lot more games than I have this year. I think they're having the intended impact here. Kansas is averaging 87 points a game. There's 5 teams in the Big 12 averaging 80 plus a game. What do you see?
Well, my opinion on this is going to be sort of clouded or biased or whatever because Kansas's offense has just been so much better this year, and I think it's mostly because of the guys they're playing, just having more guards on the floor. But I definitely think the games just from aesthetic level have looked better, and I don't know. The interesting thing is that so they have a 30-second shot clock now, and it's one of those things where when you're watching a college basketball game, you don't really notice it. I mean, it's not like you're looking at the shot clock right when they're bringing the ball up the floor and saying, "Oh, there's only
5 seconds fewer than there used to be."
Yeah, so you don't notice it, but I do think there must be something to that as well. Just even in the extra 5 or 6 possessions you get a game, or whatever, how many extra possessions you get in a game, maybe it's more than that. But there's something about the way the game has been played this year where there aren't as many times where I've looking at the floor and just saying this is bad basketball, this is bad product. That for a few minutes against Michigan State, when Kansas didn't play very well in the second half in Michigan State, and there were a lot of fouls being called. But for the most part, as things have gone, I do think you're right. I mean, I think the game looks better kind of across the board.
Well, and let's keep in mind, too, we'll refer back to something we mentioned earlier. A lot of these games for the Big 12 teams have been at home, playing with officials who are familiar with these teams and in buildings where the team is very comfortable, and the numbers will come down as the competition increases, which is always the case in conference play. Okay, so that is going to do it for us for today. Rustin, thanks a lot for being here, and big thanks to our producer engineer Chris Pickett for running the board. You have been listening to the Kansas/college basketball/Big 12 edition of Sports Beat KC. Thank you very much.